Okay, so good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for attending our webinar this morning. I'd also like to welcome Andrew May, CFO of DHL, and thank him for agreeing to give us all an insight into DHL's FP&A process and also showing us how DHL have gone from providing value as well as providing information. So you might have noticed that I've muted everybody, so if anyone has any questions, could you please type them into the chat box on the right of your screen and we will try to answer them at the end of the webinar. So before I pass you over to Andrew, I just want to give you a brief overview of Myogen and what we do and who we are. So we are a global forecasting, planning and analysis consultancy with offices in Dublin, London and Doha, and we are also going to be opening another office in Dubai in 2015. So our mission is to enable better decision making. We do this through a combination of best practices and superior technology. Also, so we work with a lot of clients, both large and small. So you have larger clients, obviously, like DHL, Saab Miller, and Etihad Airways. We also work with smaller companies like Havoc and Harkness Screens. So without further ado, I will just hand you over to Andrew. Oh, my apologies. Andrew, if you want to go ahead there, we're just having a few difficulties with the screen.
Good morning, everyone. As Peter said, my name is Andrew May. I'm CFO for DHL Freight for UK and Benelux. Today I'm going to bring you through a brief introduction of DHL, and I'm also going to give you a little bit of background as to where we were pre-adaptive planning, and I will talk a little bit about what we wanted to achieve, the model we wanted to get in place, and where we are today and how we actually went on the journey to going from just providing information to actually providing real value to the bottom line. So firstly, just to have a view of DHL. DHL is a very large organization, and most people would know it from its DHL Parcels, which is our DHL Express division. It's part of the Deutsche Post group. We have a number of different divisions within that group. We have Global Forwarding, which is air and ocean, Supply Chain, which is integrated warehousing solutions, and then we have DHL Freight, which is all around our road European intermodal transport networks. So DHL Freight is a division that I am based in, and it is a division that is quite labor intensive. It has a lot of overhead in regards to equipment and FTEs. So we start off with DHL UK, which is where we initially rolled a model out in freight. And if we go into the actual country, you will see, if you go ahead to the next slide, Peter, you will see that we have about 180 road terminals firstly in Europe, and within UK we have about 13 terminals. We have about 1,000 FTEs, of which 750 are blue collar, which is a mixture of drivers and warehouse, and we have about 500 vehicles. So we have quite a diverse setup in the UK in regards to products as well. We have our domestic network, we have a European network that we service as part of the greater group. Plus we have a lot of other specialized services such as customer services, custom services, fair-to-fair events, and also as well what we call lead logistics providers, where we look after the logistics network for companies across all industries. So where we were when I joined the organization in freight, which is about 2.5 years ago, we had pretty much everything done on spreadsheets. So where we were, we had a couple of different TMS systems, or our trade lane management systems. They effectively one system looking after our domestic business and one system looking after our European business. We'd HR data coming in, we'd financial data coming in, and we had numerous offline data sheets as well. So our reporting was very much an extremely manual affair. We didn't have one truth in a lot of cases because controlling or finance interpreted the information and passed it on to the business, and again the business had their own view on where things were by pulling information directly from their own systems, or indeed having their own viewpoint on it. So there was a large degree of manual effort, a lot of number crunching, and it left very little time to really sit with the business and dig into the key drivers. So that was reporting. In regards to budgets, budgets were again a very manual, painful affair. We had numerous spreadsheets which fed into a master spreadsheet. We're blighted with formula errors, and the whole process effectively kicked off in June for a September presentation to our senior board. So during those months we had lots of time spent on prepping sheets, distributing sheets, collating information, interpreting the information, bringing it together, making sense of it, and it was a long, arduous affair. As well, when we came to our monthly forecasts, because we had so much detail in the actual budget, to actually do a straightforward rolling forecast we had to keep it at a very high level because we could not go into the detailed spreadsheets on a monthly basis. So again, the forecasts were not meaningful. We needed to get to a better place. We needed to turn a corner and see what we could do to try and automate and make life easier for all the finance team, and to move from a pure manual number crunching exercise to actually streamlining it and to providing better information and better support to the business. So the first thing we looked at was the whole area as to what we wanted the reporting system, what were the key cornerstones of the system. So the very first thing was that we wanted one single source of information. We didn't want to be pulling information from several different areas and having to consolidate it, which would lead us to one truth. So we wanted no issues in regards to what we thought was the correct figures versus what the local managers and the different terminals thought were the accurate figures. We wanted speed and stability, so as people access the system, we didn't want the system to slow down. We didn't want any downtime on the system. We wanted the system to be secure, and we also moved towards a cloud-based system as well for the first time, where we still do have central databases and I suppose data farms within the DHL organization. This, by moving to a cloud system, it allowed us to not only not worry about the system architecture and the hardware maintenance, also any software updates were done automatically on it. So it took a lot of maintenance out of the way. It dumbed down, I suppose, our own IT elements and what IT, how they would normally support a system. So in effect, the system, the adaptive planning system, sits within the hands and the ownership of the finance organization. Also, next, sorry, just the last two items were the ease of maintenance on the system. So we wanted the system to be easy to maintain. We didn't want to spend a week updating and maintaining the system, which would be counterproductive to what we wanted to achieve. And also ease of access. So we wanted to be able to access the system with relative ease. That it was secure, but it was easy to get into. And as well, we could tailor people's access rights as well. Okay, so I mean, this is a fairly basic slide, but I will talk around it a little bit more. effectively, we broke it down into three main elements, how we approached the model. So we looked at firstly our revenue, which was driven by volume. So volume was our key driver on the whole budget. That was our very first starting point with regards to developing adaptive insights. We then looked at how we would do our margin forecasting, so the different elements that made up our cost of sales, which a lot were resource planning around our vehicles, around our blue-collar workers, around our subcontractors, etc. And then overhead, so which is obviously a mixture of fixed and variable. The fixed was reasonably easy to forecast forward, so again, how we would look at building up our variable cost base. Okay, so the resource forecasting, what we done was we built up a volume forecast, which I'll come to on the next slide. And out of that volume forecast, then we looked at what resource per unit we would have. The resource per unit that we used to determine, we looked at what our metrics were. We devised metrics for each part of the business as our key drivers. We set benchmarks on those for best in class. And effectively, once we had the volume, and we had the resource per unit, well, then that gave us our resource requirement, which built up into the P&L. So the volume forecasting was obviously the key figure. If we had the volume wrong, we had our forecast wrong, we had our resource requirement wrong. So the volume forecasting was an absolute key to ensure we had it as accurate as possible. So we looked at all the different elements, and effectively within adaptive we created an area for the majority of these elements. So the very first one, the most basic one, was what is our run rate, looking at a year on year and year to date. We would have a strong link in with the sales database, so we would upload all their pipeline data and weight it by product, by location. And that would be something we would sanitize very, very closely with the sales team. So again, we would have a separate area within that, within adaptive insights. We then looked at seasonality. So again, we built in a seasonality ratio into the figures to ensure that we had the proper links. That would be in our business towards the back end of the year. It would pick up very, very strongly, and there'd be months that would be very quiet, so that summer months where you'd have factory closures, etc. Other key areas would be churn lost business, so to get a percentage. So again, we looked at what percentage of business we would have on a churn basis per annum. Again, we would monitor that and adjust the churn, so once it's a matter of simply putting in a percentage figure, which again would adjust our revenue figure. Rate fluctuations, so general rate increases, which doesn't impact the volume, but it does impact the revenue and the margin. So again, we may go out at least once, if not twice a year, with rate increases depending on what's happening in the marketplace. And lastly, any other impacts that we may have, so any, especially in our specialized area, where you would have sort of lumpy turnover due to project type work. So we would have to manage that slightly different, in that you cannot just take a flat run rate. You have to do very, very close projections into months. So that effectively gave us our volume. Now from there, now we're starting to get into the real value add, as now we're going out to the business. And this slide gives you a little bit of an indication as to the cycle that we go through each month. So, the top left-hand corner, we're looking at the cost per unit. So we devise a standard cost per unit for the business, and we can bring that down to whatever level we want. We can bring it down to, you know, whether it's number of FTEs per unit, whether it's number of forklifts, whether it's, you know, pallet wrapping, you know, you can bring it right down to the basic unit if you wish. We didn't go too deep on it, and I'll come to that in a minute as to sort of the fine line between having a extremely complex model and something that is easy to view and understand. Then you're looking at your resource per unit, which I touched on previous, so the number of units per FTE, what our transport requirement is per unit, what our fuel usage would be per unit, etc. So that again fed directly into our resource planning also. So as we sort of planned forward on the basis of our volume, that fed into the bottom left-hand corner, which was our resource planning. And within that, we had productivity targets and metric KPIs. And that is where the business sort of now had a viewpoint as to what volume fluctuations would mean to their planning. So rather than doing on the back of a pack of cigarettes as they had been in the past, now they had a very, very detailed view as to what impact volume fluctuations would mean. We could sensitize it, so we could you know, increase by 10%, reduce by 10%, and we could see what we needed to plan towards, which is critical when you have when you need to recruit, you know, temporary labor, whether it's drivers, whether it's warehouse staff, whether it's upping equipment, whether it's bringing on additional tractor units and trailers, etc. Some may be specialized with roller beds or refrigerated units, etc. So that was really key to helping us plan forward. And obviously the more you plan forward, the lower the costs. What we're finding was that a lot of the resources were brought in sort of within a couple of days of when the requirement was needed. And as such, they're paying higher rates, and they were maybe not having enough time to train in staff, maybe not being able to source the correct equipment, which is all impacting our bottom line. So that resource planning is something that we're continuing to work on. It's something that we have developed a cockpit as well, a scorecard cockpit for our terminals and our branches. We're actually moving in towards weekly P&Ls, so that is something that we're currently working on, so that a branch knows at the end of on a Monday how they actually performed the previous week, and again it will give them sort of short-term and long-term resource planning, so they can very quickly adjust, upgrade or downgrade the resources, the variable resources that they have on hand. So that, in a nutshell, is how we got there. Now, just to say as well, it wasn't just a case of bringing in a system. We also had to have a look at our team. So again, I did change the team structure around. I did mix up the skill set in the team. In that we created a sort of what we call a business controller role, which sort of was a little bit distant from finance, where we had sort of a finance operations community who done the number crunching, and then a business controlling community who effectively sat with the business and helped them interpret data, helped them plan, and you know, helped them drive more profitability out of the business. So that is it in a nutshell. If anybody has any questions or you have any further
Great.
on what we've done.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Andrew, and thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to give that webinar. And as I said, if anybody has any questions, could you please type them into the chat box provided. And Andrew will hopefully answer them for you. So first, I just have a question myself, Andrew. Just what exactly was the catalyst that drove you to change from spreadsheets to an automated system?
Well, as I said at the start, it was firstly enhancing the tools that finance have, So we wanted to become more automated and less manual. We wanted to reduce the time that we're spending on doing manual number crunching and to actually spend more time in the business and sitting with the business, and effectively changed the whole relationship between finance and the business. So we went from being a provider of information to being an actual business partner, a real business partner. And I suppose that was the key starting point, and to get away from the onerous and painful process of having to prepare multiple spreadsheets every year at budget time.
Great, perfect. And I just have another question here for someone from the audience. So how much business analytics did you use, and how did this impact on your analysis and decision making?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. When we were developing the model and building the model up, one of the areas, it's not just creating the model, it's actually creating how the model is going to think and how we are going to look at the business model. That, I think, is a constant, we're never set in stone with that. That is a constant journey in that we're constantly changing how we view it. But in regards to the business analyst, we did define how we wanted to look at the business. We did define the skill set that was required to help with that. So we did change the team around somewhat, where we had sort of people who were pure number crunchers, and we needed more insightful business analytical type skill sets. So we brought them in, and we spent, as I said, a lot of time trying to understand how we wanted the model to think and how we wanted to view the business.
Great. And just one other question I have here is, what are the key challenges you came across when linking internal with third-party vendor data?
Okay, well, with our systems, I mean, we're effectively bringing in information from probably 3 to 4 points at this stage. And I'm talking main TMS systems and our finance system, which is Oracle. So we also then, after we produce information, so budgets, etc., they are uploaded into a main SAP system in Germany. Now, with regards to bringing in information, I suppose that was reasonably straightforward, in that once we created a mapping between the third party or the external piece of software and Adaptive, it was very straightforward to bring it in every month. We did create our account structure in Adaptive to mirror what we had in our local systems, so that the mapping was reasonably straightforward. Other areas such as personnel information, fleet information, facilities information, we brought all that in as well. And again, that was reasonably easy to bring in. What we will get onto, and it's something that I'll be discussing with MyGen in the coming months, is to try and automate that a lot more. So we're running reports, and it's automatically brought from the local systems into Adaptive, so it's seamless in that regard. They've also, over the years, Adaptive have developed the back end, so how we get the information out and into a central SAP system for budgeting purposes. So again, there's a mapping at the back end. So again, we would take an Adaptive CREST structure and map that into an SAP CREST structure. It's a piece of work that needs to be done at the start, but once it's done, it runs quite seamlessly.
Great. Andrew, I think the last question was, you talked about the fact that you started from an Excel model, and what software did you end up using? I think you just covered that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Great. And I just have one final question. I suppose, would you have any tips for people who are looking to make improvements to their FP&A processes?
Yeah, I think I think if you're going down the path of moving to systems such as adaptive or another system, to give yourself enough time and bandwidth and to have the proper resource in place. You know, I think when we initially started our project, we probably underestimated the amount of time we needed to sit back and think about the model, rather than just, I suppose, start building it. So Mygen helped us build it, but in regards to what we wanted, I think it is something that you do need to give yourself time on. You do need, I would certainly give myself a 3-month window where you do have that flexibility to dedicate time towards the model. It is a mindset, so when you get into it, you need to keep it going. You can't. It's very hard to dip in and out of it over a course of several months, because you lose sight as to where you were and where your thinking was. I would also say that not to overcomplicate the model. When we initially started building the model for the UK, for example, we were sort of a little bit overwhelmed by what we could do, and we started building in everything that we could possibly think into the model, which I suppose has its downsides in that you have to maintain it. Again, as my first point, you don't want to be spending a week every month trying to maintain the system. Plus, you want a clean, clear logic in the model. So, you know, if somebody else comes along and starts looking at what you've devised, that it does have a clean, clear logic to it, and you're not going around in circles to get to a figure. And that allows it to, as well, if you're moving it from country to country, which I'm currently doing. If you have a clean, simple model, that is almost a vanilla model. Let's say you can pick and drop it into other countries with reasonable ease, and make your local assumptions around the model to allow that local flexibility for planning.
Great, perfect. Great. Well, thank you very much for that, Andrew, and thank you for everyone who attended. And I hope you found the event to be insightful, and you've taken some tips away from that. So thanks again, Andrew, and thanks for everyone who attended. Thank you.
Thank you.